teens across the north, low 20s further south, maybe a little warmer across the southeast where 24 is possible. A breezy Saturday evening then, the wind strengthening further over northern Scotland, getting really quite gusty here actually, and that continues into Sunday. So a blustery Sunday across Scotland. Small showers to come in the northwest, but much of eastern Scotland likely to stay dry. A few showers on Sunday will whiz through Northern Ireland, south of Scotland, perhaps one or two in northwest England, but again much of England, Wales and indeed eastern Scotland likely to stay dry. Bright and breezy with temperatures around about average, perhaps a little below, and feeling cooler with the gusty winds across Scotland. But further south, we will again see temperatures getting into the low 20s. Enjoy your week.
First and foremost, I'm a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the People's Channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my two comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute? Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christie's at Drive Time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christie's, on GB News and GB News Radio.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There'll be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Congratulations to Nigel Farage, voted by you as the nation's best news presenter at the prestigious Trick Awards.
It's 9 o'clock on television, on radio and online in the United Kingdom and across the world. This is Mark Dolan Tonight. In My Big Opinion, with Nigel Farage having his bank account closed down and a major building society admitting it cancels the accounts of customers its views it doesn't agree with, Britain is now facing an all-out war on free speech, and we should all be worried. In the big story, is the Rwanda plan dead and buried? I'll be speaking to a top Tory peer furious about the Supreme Court verdict. In my take at 10, BBC star Gary Lineker has called for the bonkers idea of renationalising water. I'll be dealing with this multi-millionaire socialist in no uncertain terms. Stick to flogging crisps, Gary. So, a busy 2 hours to come. My first on-air reaction to the cancellation of Nigel Farage's bank account. The world's gone mad, folks. That's in 2 minutes' time. And it is Friday night. So, we've got that Friday feeling. Get the kids to bed, put something cold and fizzy in the fridge, or fire up the kettle, tear open the custard creams, and let's make it a night to remember. Lots to get through. First, the headlines with a good friend of mine, Aaron Armstrong.
A very good evening to you. 1 minute past 9 here in the GB newsroom. 45,000 police officers have been deployed across France as authorities anticipate a fourth night of violent unrest. The Interior Minister, Gérald Darmanin, has confirmed 917 people were arrested on Thursday, some of them as young as 13. President Macron has urged parents to keep children at home. Large-scale events have been cancelled and buses and trams suspended nationwide. Protesters are demanding justice for a 17-year-old known as Nahel, who was shot dead by police in a suburb of Paris on Tuesday. The president's also considering imposing a state of emergency to crack down on rioting and looting. British tourists have been warned about they may face disruption if they travel to France. Meanwhile, the government is aiming to employ 300,000 new staff in England as part of its NHS workforce plan. More doctors, nurses and other healthcare workers will be trained, in addition to more university places for medical and nursing students created. There will also be a greater emphasis on apprenticeships. The 15-year plan aims to train more staff domestically to reduce the reliance on international recruitment and agencies. The Prime Minister says it's focusing on 3 key areas of reform.
This is the NHS's own plan, and the government is proud to back it. Funding the expansion of education and training for the first 5 years in full, with over £2.4 billion of additional investment. You can trust this government with the NHS. The plan rests on 3 principles: train, retain and reform.
Lord Zach Goldsmith says he's happy to apologise for sharing his views on the Commons investigation into Boris Johnson's Partygate probe. The Tory peers hit back after Rishi Sunak says he'd refused to apologise, saying his comments about the Privileges Committee were incompatible with his position as a minister. Lord Goldsmith has now admitted he shouldn't have expressed his views publicly. A court's been told the Oscar-winning actor Kevin Spacey is a sexual bully who exploited his illustriousness and influence to sexually assault other men. Prosecutors described Spacey as a man who delights in making others feel powerless and uncomfortable on day one of his trial at Southwark Crown Court. He's accused of attacking 4 men in their 20s and 30s during his 12 years in the UK. Spacey denies all allegations against him. Energy bills are likely to remain high for the immediate future, despite a saving of £406 a year that comes into place from tomorrow. A new price cap will come in over the weekend, but bills will still be almost double the amount they were before the energy crisis began 2 years ago. That's about £800 more expensive. Ofgem says it has taken a range of steps to stabilise the market and to protect customers. Millions more British people will be able to live and work in Australia when the age limit for working holiday visas is raised tomorrow. The extension from 30 to 35 means 16 million adults are now eligible. The visa duration will also be extended from 2 to 3 years without the need for consecutive stays or farm work, which will probably be a relief to many who hope to move there. TV online, DAB, radio and tune in. This is GB News. But now it is back to the friendly Mark Dolan.
My thanks to Aaron Armstrong, who returns at 10. Welcome to Mark Dolan Tonight. In my big opinion, with Nigel Farage having his bank account closed down, and a major building society admitting it cancels the accounts of customers its views it doesn't agree with, Britain is now facing an all-out war on free speech, and we should all be worried. Find out why in just 1 minute's time. In the big story, is the Rwanda plan dead and buried? I'll be speaking to a top Tory peer furious about the Supreme Court verdict. Also, is net zero an expensive waste of time? I'll be asking climate skeptic and international best-selling author Bjorn Lomborg. In my take at 10, BBC star Gary Lineker has called for the bonkers idea of renationalising water. That's right, the government is just going to buy water. I'll be dealing with this millionaire socialist in no uncertain terms. Stick to flogging crisps, Gary. Following ITV News' report featuring a trans woman discussing the cost of living crisis, can a biological man ever be a mother? I'll be asking tonight's newsmaker, the no-nonsense legendary actress and Allo Allo star, Sue Hodge. Mark Dolan tonight is the home of The Papers, with tomorrow's front pages from exactly 10:30. You can set your watch to it. With 3 top pundits who haven't been told what to say and who don't follow the script. Tonight, Hilary Freeman, David Oldroyd-Bolt and Stephanie Tetchy. Tonight I'll be asking the pundits, as the RAF discriminate against white candidates, has the push for diversity gone too far? Also, should all over 40s have a free health MOT? And as supermarkets now have to lock up chocolate, dishwasher tablets and instant coffee, is shoplifting now out of control? Plus your emails, especially the spicy ones, they come straight to this laptop, folks. Oops. mark@gbnews.com. So you write the email, you send it to me, and it goes on TV and it goes on the radio. This show has a golden rule. We don't do boring, not on my watch. I just won't have it. It's Friday night, so let's have some fun. Grab a cold beer or fire up the kettle and let's get to work. Britain's descent into banana republic status accelerated this week with the news that GB News star Nigel Farage has had all his bank accounts closed. Now, I don't have the details of Nigel's situation, but if the man that I know, who is charming, a true gentleman and a fabulous professional, turns out to be an international gangster to rival Al Capone, then fair enough. But somehow I doubt it. Given how censorious the so-called free world is becoming, it would be hardly surprising if this move is politically motivated. Punishment for Nigel's involvement in Brexit and for his strong views on issues like illegal immigration, which are hardly controversial, by the way, and are shared by millions. But wanting our borders to actually function as borders is enough to get you cancelled in 2023. And cancel culture now has a powerful corporate arm, with just a few months ago, a major online bank ending its relationship with the very popular podcast Trigonometry. What was the great crime of this show, hosted by the talented comedians Constantine Kissin and Francis Foster, interviewing politicians and public figures from across the political spectrum, including people and topics shunned by mainstream broadcasters. Blimey, what monsters they are. The weaponisation of banking for political ends has been ramped up since the pandemic, with the smiling tyrant Justin Trudeau, Canada's ultra-woke Prime Minister, freezing the bank accounts of Canadian truckers who had the temerity to protest against draconian vaccine mandates. Many of them had even been vaccinated, but didn't think it was right that it should be forced on others. And for that, in a state intervention that would have Kim Jong-un of North Korea blushing, Trudeau denied these Canadian citizens access to their own money. Take note, supporters of a cashless society. This could become the norm. You only get access to your money if you obey the state. Welcome to hell. Things are even worse in Silicon Valley in woke California, with online payment companies like PayPal and crowdfunding businesses like GoFundMe restricting access to their services based upon the user's politics. Like the Daily Skeptic online newspaper, who have quite rightly challenged the efficacy of lockdowns and highlighted their huge damage. Plus, they've sought to spark a healthy and balanced debate on issues around climate change. And for that, they were ditched by PayPal altogether, because apparently debating the major issues of the day is problematic. Let me tell you, these illiberal echo chamber corporate bullies are what problematic looks like. How about the parents group Us for Them, set up by the brilliant Molly Kingsley to highlight the impact of pandemic measures like masking and school closures on children? They were also dumped by PayPal. So even speaking up for kids will see you punished financially. What a time to be alive. The blitzkrieg of censorship reached its nadir when the Free Speech Union, populated by top lawyers and academics, saw its funding mechanism removed for trying to uphold, wait for it, free speech. You couldn't make it up. There are now so many ways in which people are being punished for saying or thinking the wrong thing. Like the Yorkshire Building Society customer whose savings account, it is claimed, was closed after he asked why their branches were festooned with pride flags everywhere. Not an outrageous question, given it's a bank. This very channel has been targeted too. GB News have been the victims of an advertising boycott because we dare to give you a voice and debate the important issues affecting this country that most of establishment media seek to gloss over or completely ignore. Ultimately, these people would love to see us closed down by starving us of cash. But let me tell you, we're not going anywhere. In the end, the censors won't win. And with this move on Nigel and others, it's my view that they have overplayed their hand. Organisations and individuals that speak truth to power and reflect the genuine concerns of the public will ultimately prevail. The truth will always out, with or without the help of these utter bankers. What's your reaction to that? Mark at gbnews.com. I'll get to your emails very shortly. Let's get the views now of my top pundits this evening. I'm delighted to welcome journalist and agony aunt Hilary Freeman, historian and writer David Oldroyd-Bolt, and reporter and broadcaster Stephanie Tecci. Let me start with you, Hilary. Your reaction to these rather censorious banks cancelling the accounts of people whose views they don't agree with.
Well, it won't be any surprise to you to know that I don't agree with Nigel Farage on very much, but I do think this is a terrible thing. I don't agree with this at all. Banks should not be able to close accounts just because they don't like people's views. Obviously, if somebody is using funds to fund hatred or terrorism, that's a different matter. But somebody has a view that they don't agree with, that's free speech.
Indeed. I mean, if, however, let's say that the Daily Sceptic online newspaper published a story about trans activism which could be perceived as transphobic, perhaps that is the publishing of hate speech and therefore they should be censored.
Well, then you have a debate about it. You certainly don't just close their account. I mean, people are just finding out that their accounts are closed when they go to the checkout and they can't use their money. I mean, what doesn't make sense is that everything is sort of computerised now, but somebody has to make this decision. So that should be a conversation that is had. You shouldn't just be able to... It's like, this mentality of, like, blocking people on Twitter because you don't agree with them rather than debating anything or discussing it.
And we should all be afraid, shouldn't we? Because,
yes.
I mean, you are about the most lovely, liberal, politically correct person I know, but you hold quite gender-critical views, so even you might fear for some aspects of your life going forward if this culture prevails.
Sure, I was going to say, I wouldn't say I'm particularly politically correct. I'm a liberal. I'm an old-fashioned liberal, basically.
Yeah.
I do. But it's very reminiscent of fascist regimes. My grandparents, I've talked about it before, they were German Jews during the Holocaust, during the Nazi-era Germany. And my granddad's father's business was closed down, it was taken away, they weren't allowed to have bank accounts, my granddad couldn't go to school. So for me, this kind of is reminiscent of that.
David Oldroyd-Bolt, does this story have worrying historic echoes?
Well, as Hilary mentioned, there are those echoes, and of course in the Soviet Union your access to anything was entirely a function of whether you fell into line with the state. I think the problem with this story for me is that banks which are private companies have an absolute right to refuse custom. You cannot compel private companies to provide custom to people on any basis whatsoever. Where the bank has any nationalised aspect to it, I think there should be an expectation that they do not refuse custom for those views. And as a further point, I think that there needs to be legislation very quickly to ensure that all companies are obliged to take cash payments. I think the move towards a cashless society, which was initially done under the guise of COVID security, and is in fact just to save some banking fees, risks creating a really desperate fissure in society between those who have the ability to bank digitally and who find it all very easy, and those who, for whatever reason, personal preference, budgetary, or simply because they don't want to use debit cards and mobile technology, want to use cash. And I think there should be a compulsion from the state, in this instance alone, that people should have to pay, or should have the option of paying. Because as Mr Farage pointed out in his video yesterday, if you do not now have a bank account, you're essentially shut out of society. Now, of course, when the post office was still nationalised, everybody had the right to a post office account. Maybe, therefore, there is something that we could look at there, given that the post office is such a failing company. Well, let's make them do something for the community.
They could do with the deposits. Stephanie Tetcher, your reaction to this censorship by banks?
Mark, it feels like a troubling sign of the times. It just feels like the banks are trying to, or this bank in question is trying to push us to this kind of Big Brother, China, communist state where if your views or your expressions or opinions doesn't fit in with what they think, they're going to shut you down and you're going to be penalised for that. The bank's jobs is to protect our financial assets. This bank in question is actually in danger of being discriminatory, like they're accusing Farage of being. So how does this make sense?
What's your reaction? Mark at gbnews.com. In 40 minutes' time, at 10 o'clock, I'll be dealing with Gary Lineker, who wants to nationalise water. But next up in the big story, is the Rwanda plan dead and buried? I'll be speaking to a top Tory peer furious about the Supreme Court verdict. That's next.
First and foremost, I'm a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the People's Channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my two comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute? Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christie's, at drive time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christie's, on GB News and GB News Radio.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News.
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There'll be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Anybody guilty of wrongthink is suffering the cancellation of their bank accounts, not least Nigel Farage, but many others. That was the topic of my big opinion, which you'll be able to catch up on via Twitter at GB News in the next couple of minutes. Let's have a look at your emails, mark@gbnews.com. How about this from Declan? Banks and Farage. If you can't name the bank, you're just a bunch of lily-livered weasels. No name, no bottle, whinging cowards. You make me puke, says Declan. Declan's not happy there. Stuart says, if we're going for a cashless society, companies should be obliged to accept crypto where you are your own bank. Kathy says, hi, Mark. This is exactly the subject I raised with my MP. Who will be next to be debanked? Little old me. Keep pushing this, please, says Kathy. And Kathy, I bet there's nothing little about you. I bet you are a giant of a woman, but in an intellectual sense, by the way. Blimey, that's... I'm on rocky ground there, aren't I, Kathy? Listen, how about this from Bob? Hi, Mark. Not correct. A bank can be compelled as much as a cake shop can be compelled to produce a cake for gay people. A couple more before we go. Rob, this bank should be named and shamed. Then the great court of public opinion can have its say. And last but not least, Paul. Hi, Mark. I don't agree with everything that Nigel has to say, but to have his account shut down and not being able to go elsewhere is a conspiracy to drive him out. It's disgusting. He also goes on to say, I'm sure there are far worse people who have accounts in this country. Well, Paul, you raise a very good point. I wonder whether that evil, despicable lotto rapist has a bank account. His millions are somewhere. Not good enough for Nigel Farage. The world's gone mad. Now, ex-Prime Minister Boris Johnson is back in the news, giving his backing to the Rwanda plan, which was supported by the Supreme Court this week. Take a listen to what Bojo had to say.
Hi folks, my latest column for the Daily Mail is about the desperate people crossing the channel, the evil people traffickers who take huge sums of money to bring them across against the law, and why our Rwanda policy is one of the best hopes we still have to stop this vile trade, and a small change in the law that we can make to get the Rwanda policy back, get Rwanda done, read all.
Blimey, I thought he was going to get blown away. Luckily, he's quite substantial, so that would be hard. So, is a simple change in the law enough, or is Rishi Sunak's Rwanda plan now dead in the water? Let's speak to Baroness Foster of Oxton for reaction. Baroness Foster, you're not happy about this decision by the Supreme Court, are you?
No, I'm not. I'm absolutely furious. We always knew, I think it was going to be a challenge from even before they talked about Rwanda, when we were having horrendous problems trying to deport people who we actually knew about, who'd been released from prison, who'd been, spent time being sentenced for sort of rape and murder. And then the aircraft didn't go because the human rights lawyers were in there. Obviously, this is now a couple of years down the line. And we have a court case which has been for this is the Civil Service Union. And of course, civil servants are bound by their codes of practice to remain politically neutral. So then you've got to ask yourself, what's actually happening in the Home Office? So as I said, I'm absolutely furious. We are a very generous country. And when we look at people from Ukraine, Syria, Afghanistan, Iraq, Hong Kong, we really are very, very supportive. But I think the public are absolutely sick and tired of this. This is going against the will of the people. In our 2019 manifesto, we said we will deal with this. We know there's probably been about 1 million people, including obviously legitimate people who have come here over the last 3 years. Schools are under pressure. The health service is under pressure. Housing is under pressure. And all we're doing is sitting in the House of Lords day after day, while we, of course, we're not a Conservative majority in the House of Lords, but we go through the debates. The same people in the opposition put down more amendments, or the same amendments, spend hours trying to talk all of it out. Goes back to the Commons. They ignore what the Commons have said, which is obviously the supreme chamber here. And we go over it all again, and it'll carry on next week. Meanwhile, we have this trade in human misery, and we have people who are multimillionaires on the backs of it.
Yes, Baroness Foster, do you think the Rwanda plan is salvageable?
Well, it should be. I mean, there are people from Denmark, Norway, the UNHCR. There are people in Rwanda who are living perfectly well. Of course, years ago, Rwanda was one of those countries, and I, for 5 years, was on the Africa, Caribbean, Pacific Joint Parliamentary Assembly in my first mandate as a member of the European Parliament. And there are challenging countries, but they've really got past a lot of that. And they even have people in their government who are actually former refugees who have now made a life in Rwanda. So maybe it's not perfect, but it's certainly a damn sight better than probably some of the places some of these people have come from.
Baroness Foster, what would you say to those who argue that the Rwanda plan is unworkable, it's expensive, and that it's cruel? On last night's BBC Question Time programme, the presenter asked for a show of hands, those in support of the Rwanda policy, and no hands were raised.
Well, I would expect nothing less from Question Time, frankly. I think also people feel intimidated. You see it on Twitter, don't you? And you'll get people who are anonymous and they will say what they really think. I mean, we might like what they think, or we mightn't like what they think. But people feel intimidated sometimes, particularly when they're sitting in a room. You wouldn't, and I wouldn't, for example. We'd go, this is our position. But it's very, very difficult on sensitive issues for a lot of people because they feel very, very concerned and they'll feel quite afraid to do that. But we know the vast majority of people want us to deal with this. They have no issue over Rwanda. And as I said, this is undermining the will of the people. It's undermining the voters of this country that expect the government of the day, which is us, to actually do the best we can. And they also expect the opposition to be constructive, because this is about the good of the nation. This is about the security of the nation. We don't even know who some of these people are coming across on boats. They dispose of their identification. We already have, special services that are having to track people who are terrorists, frankly, in this country. And yet what we do, we're welcoming. There are people here welcoming people. They have no idea where they've come from.
OK, well, look, Baroness Foster of Oxton, thank you so much for joining us on the show. Look forward to catching up soon. Let's move on to this extraordinary story. A Christian charity has been compensated £20,000 from Barclays Bank after their account was closed following pressure from LGBT groups. The groups claimed that Core Issues Trust carried out conversion therapy, whilst the charity is actually known for supporting men and women voluntarily hoping to change their sexual preference and gender identity. So, joining me now to speak on this matter is the CEO of the Core Issues Trust, Dr. Mike Davidson. Mike, what exactly happened?
Well, in 2020, we received letters from Barclays Bank saying that Core Issues Trust and the International Federation for Therapeutic and Counselling Choice would be having their accounts removed in 2 months, and that they were serving notice of that.
OK, now do you feel vindicated by this verdict? You must do.
Well, I think Barclays got off lightly. There were practical concerns that meant that we were going to have to spend an enormous amount of money to be able to continue with this, which we felt would be irresponsible. So, yes, I'm grateful that there has been something of a payment, but of course you'll realize that they have refused to admit any wrongdoing or any liability. So, and they're claiming, I see in their reports, that the courts have said nothing about this. But what they don't tell you is that the first 2 hearings, I think, were all about territorial disputes, because the bank was claiming that we should not bring a court case in Northern Ireland where the charity is registered and where the accounts were opened, but rather this should be taking place in England. So we never spoke about the substantive issues around this case.
Well, Mike, I'm glad you raised that, Mike. So what is the great crime of which you were accused by Barclays Bank, which they've had to massively apologise for? What was your terrible deed?
We offer men and women who have gone in the gay direction or have found themselves confused in gender, we offer them a place where they can work out their issues and where they can decide what the direction is that they want to go in. In other words, I guess we stand with those who would say, you're not born gay. And even though you didn't choose the feelings, you have choices around the feelings. And if it's your informed choice, nobody else is pushing you or forcing you. If it's your choice to leave homosexual practices or to return to your gender of birth, you should have the freedom to do that, irrespective of what Stonewall says.
Of course. I mean, Mike, I've got to say I have an awful lot of gay friends who would strongly argue that they definitely feel they were born gay, that it wasn't a choice, and that it's very much a blessing for them. The same with trans people. Mike, very briefly, though, is this conversion therapy? Are you trying to convert people, and is that why Barclays had a problem?
They will claim that that's what it is, but that is not what we do. What we do is we work with clients' agendas who come to us, and we support them in the goals that they have. It's not about our agenda, it's about their agenda. And the problem is we can never get to say that because we're just written off against the background of whatever misinformation Stonewall and other groups want to put out about this, including the Church of England.
Mike, great to have you on the show. Thank you so much for sharing your story. Dr. Mike Davidson is the CEO of the Core Issues Trust. Listen, it's all about opinions, isn't it? I've got to say, like I mentioned, that certainly my life experience would suggest that being gay, attracted to a same-sex partner, is something that's pretty profound, not a choice. But the way you are and who you are. But it's all about opinions, and I don't think that banks should be deciding whether or not they agree with the views of their customers. It's a bank, for God's sakes. They're there to lend you money or to give you a rate on your savings. But what do you think? Mark at GBNews.com. Coming up next with the pundits, as the RAF discriminate against white candidates, has the push for diversity gone too far? Also, should all over 40s have a free health MOT? And as supermarkets now have to lock up chocolate, dishwasher tablets and instant coffee, is shoplifting now out of control? Is being desperate ever an excuse for breaking the law? That's next.
Like all families, we have arguments every now and then, but actually we agree on what the mission of GB News is, and that's the most fundamentally important thing.
GB News provides the kind of platform that lets all voices be heard.
We don't hold back. We're free to say what we really think.
Just because some people who live in a tiny little Westminster bubble think that their particular story is important, that's not the most important story for me.
And often they will be difficult stories, stories that you won't find on the establishment media.
Because what people think in the north of England may be very different to what they're thinking in their home counties.
We're going to carry on telling the world what life is really like for households up and down the UK.
We love to be in your car, in your kitchen as you're having your breakfast. Whatever you're doing, you are part of the show. If it matters to you, it matters to us.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it. So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi, I'm Dan Wootton. You can watch me live on GB News Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. And did you know that you can also watch and listen live on our website, gbnews.com? You'll always be up to date on the latest breaking news, as well as enjoying the best stories, opinions and shows. You can even join the debate under our live player as you're watching. So head straight to gbnews.com on TV, radio and online. GB News, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes & Co, we tackle the issues of the day with real, robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
We've just spoken to a leading Christian who advises trans people and gay people about taking a different direction in life. Not views I would necessarily share, but look, we hear from everybody on this show. Des isn't happy though. Nutters is the title of the email. And Des says, hi Mark, any more dangerous Christian homophobes lined up to spout their nonsense? Des, thank you for offering your view. It's all about opinions. Keep them coming. Mark at gbnews.com. And Nikki says, hi, Mark, please keep on top of this story regarding the banks and Nigel Farage. It's terrifying that they have the power to do so much harm without even offering an explanation or dialogue. I closed my PayPal account after it cancelled the Free Speech Union. Thanks for highlighting it. Do they want to get rich using our money or not? Do they not fear a run on the bank if we all withdrew our cash in protest? Great show, says Nikki. Well, thank you for that, Nikki. Keep those emails coming, as I say. Reacting to the big stories of the day, my top pundits tonight. Journalist and agony art, Hilary Freeman. Historian and writer, David Oldroyd-Bolt. And broadcaster and reporter, Stephanie Tecci. An inquiry has found that initiatives to increase the numbers of women and people from ethnic minorities in the RAF has led to unlawful positive discrimination. The inquiry began following the resignation of a female RAF group captain who told her superiors the policy penalised white men. It was found that she had faced significant and unreasonable pressure to meet diversity targets, and the head of the RAF has admitted some men were discriminated against. So it begs the question, has the push for diversity gone too far? Stephanie Tecci, your reaction to this?
It has gone too far, Mark. You know, there's no denying in this society when it comes to equality, women and ethnic minorities, we've been at the bottom of the barrel. But when it comes to tokenism, I've never agreed with tokenism. I've always felt like people should be in positions due to merit. I don't want to be sitting here because I'm black and I'm a female.
No, you're sitting here, A, because you're smoking hot, and B, because you are the dropper of truth bombs.
Thank you so much.
As we saw during the Philip Schofield drama.
And I find with tokenism, it does a disservice to both the organisation and both the candidate, because the candidate won't get the support they need because they're just there to tick a box. And for the organisation, they're going to miss out on key talent who have got the skills to do the job. And I'm going to be a bit of a devil's advocate here because, you know, I do speak to a lot of ethnic minorities or women who read these kind of stories and they're quite happy about it because they're like, you know what, white male privilege has been the apex of this society. So if I can use my race or use my sex to get into a position, then why not? This is what white men have been doing for years. But I just think there needs to be more better safeguarding in these kind of situations.
David Oldroyd-Bolt, you're smoking hot too, don't worry. However, I do wonder whether these policies are there to rebalance our society and our great institutions. I mean, they come from the right place, don't they, these diversity policies?
No, they're deeply patronising and they are themselves racist and sexist because it imputes that women and people of colour are unable to get these jobs off their own merit. I must take issue with Stephanie saying that white male privilege is something that we've done. No, it just so happens that in Western Europe, white men tend to be the majority. So they have, of course, historically and naturally been in the majority positions of power. Now, it's right that that should change changes, the demographic of society changes, but not falsely led, and not in a situation like this, whereby these actions could very well be dangerous. If you're talking about the armed services, for instance, where people are making exceptionally serious decisions and need to be of the very highest capability, I think you are putting people's lives at risk by imputing or by saying that, no, we're not going to actually take the very best, say, fighter pilot or drone commander. We need to have this arbitrary figure because it somehow, we think, reflects society, and so we'll give it to that person. I think it's dangerous, and I don't think it does come from the right place. It's patronising and it's silly.
It's interesting, isn't it? The ill-fated captain of the Titan submarine boasted before that tragedy that he had the most diverse team and he didn't want old white men on board. Didn't age that well. Now, take a look at this, folks. A midlife MOT DIY test kit is to be sent to all over 40s due to a huge shake-up of the NHS. 15 million adults aged 40 to 74 will be eligible for the NHS new digital MOT, which can be completed on their phone or laptop. The health assessment will include answering questions about their weight, height, diet, alcohol intake, God forbid, and exercise. Also, patients have blood testing kits to complete. So is it worth the money to give over 40s a health MOT? Hilary?
Well, I don't think it's the way to do it. I mean, it's very well known that these kinds of surveys, people lie. People lie about how much they drink, they lie about how much they smoke, they lie about their weight. So really, are they, what are we going to learn from this? And if the idea is that loads of people are just put on statins so that don't have to be seen, don't have to be dealt with, I don't think that's the answer. I think more important, people should be able to actually see their GP. Maybe we should have, every 2 years, if you haven't been to see your GP in the meantime, you should have some sort of a checkup.
Like the dentist.
Like the dentist, exactly, where you can actually talk through any concerns, because you might have something that's niggling, which to you isn't anything important, but if you don't see a doctor for years and years and years and years, it might become something serious. And you're not going to put it down on a form that asks for your height and weight, that, you've got a little lump in your mouth or, just something that's bothering you. And so I think it's so much more important that we actually see our doctors.
I like that, the obligatory 2-year checkup. What a great shout. Now, supermarkets are displaying half-empty bottles of tomato ketchup in an attempt to stop shoplifters. So, in other words, they can't have the whole bottle, right? It's like a sample. Customers in a supermarket brand were told by a sign to speak to members of staff for help, but that's not all. Items such as coffee and chocolate and washing products are being locked up too. According to the Office for National Statistics, shoplifting has risen by 20% compared to the end of 2021. Is shoplifting now out of control? And, Hilary Freeman, is being desperate ever an excuse to break the law?
Well, it's interesting. I know somebody who had a job interview recently for a security job in a supermarket, and he was asked, what would you do if you caught someone stealing bacon? And his response was, well, quite frankly, if I saw someone stealing bacon, they were that desperate that they needed to steal bacon, it's not exactly they're going to be able to sell it on the black market, is it? Then I would actually let them take it. Obviously, he didn't get the job. But that is the point, isn't it? If things are so expensive, if basic essentials are so expensive that people have to steal them, then there is something wrong with our society. People don't shoplift things like food because they want to sell them on.
That said, David Oldroyd-Bolt, I wonder whether this is an insult to any Brits who are struggling, who don't steal.
Of course it is. That's obvious. And I'm afraid I can't share Hilary's charitable assumption that all these people stealing are doing so because they're in dire poverty. I think they're doing so because shoplifting isn't prosecuted. Because like many forms of petty theft and crime, the police simply don't bother about it. Just as if you have your bicycle stolen in London, for instance, and you ring the Met and say, this has happened, they basically tell you, well, we're not going to do anything about it. And I just think it's an absolutely dire indictment of society that the police seem more worried about things like people being caused offence because they've had something nasty said to them on Twitter or because they have expressed a point of view that someone else dislikes than they do about actual crime. And knife crime, for instance, in London is an epidemic level. And yet the police are doing very, very little about it. So I don't think it's because people are in poverty, and I do think that anybody using that excuse is being, I think, rather unkind to those who are struggling but do the right thing.
Well, what about those people who will steal a block of butter or some cheese just to feed their kids, Stephanie?
Desperate times call for desperate measures. It's not that I agree with it, but then you think there are some people who are living below the poverty line and they're not making money, and that's the only way it becomes like an addiction. Shoplifting is an addiction for some people, and it's their way of life, and it's the way they can get food on the table. I think it's a reflection of how poor Britain is right now and how many people are struggling. I think putting a story out like this out there, shoplifters are quite smart. Where there's a will, there will be a way for them to get that bottle of ketchup.
Too right. What do you think? Is being desperate an excuse to break the law? Mark at gbnews.com. In just 15 minutes' time, I'll be dealing with the millionaire socialist Gary Lineker, who wants to renationalise water. But next up, is net zero an expensive waste of time? I'll be asking climate skeptic and international best-selling author Bjorn Lomborg. He's next.
I joined GB News because I was sick and tired of not hearing my views being represented, not just mine, but so many people that I knew and spoke to.
I just couldn't get my voice out there. I couldn't say anything, I couldn't do anything. Whatever the narrative was, I kind of had to follow it.
GB News is there to provide a voice for those who have been ignored by the establishment media. We think different things, we've got a different style.
GB News is here to be optimistic and positive about the future.
It's real kind of dynamic and flowing, with the audience very much at the heart of it, like a big family.
Here at GB News, we talk about the things that matter to you.
Hearing the voices from right across our towns and cities, especially our towns.
All sides of the argument represented with a heavy dose of opinion.
We're on a mission here to make a difference.
And the GB News family really is here for you, and whatever time of day you can watch or listen.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prison.
I'm completely stunned.
I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
You've probably seen politicians interviewed 1,000 times, but we do it differently. We find out who they really are, we don't shout, we chat, and hopefully we bring a bit of light, not just heat. Did you know Kate Moss?
Apparently.
Do you have a pair of jeans or a pair of jeans?
No, of course I don't. What would I do with them?
My friends are like, oh my God, what's she doing now?
Join me every Sunday at 6 for Gloria Meets, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Weeknights on GB News from 6 p.m. You'll always get drama.
Please stop, Michelle.
I know, yeah.
Please stop.
Should I just shut up?
Romance.
You like me, I like you. There you go.
There you are. Well, don't tell anybody.
Adventure.
Etc.
That's the whole point. But
and action.
Sergeant, read my superstar panel. They're already at it. They're fighting. It's going to be quite a show.
Only on GB News. Britain's watching.
In a world of dull and predictable radio and TV shows.
Oh, hi. On Mark Dolan tonight, we've got big guests. We drill into the big stories of the day. The show adds up to a brilliant listening and viewing experience. Mark Dolan Tonight is the most entertaining current affairs show ever, and that's a fact. That's Mark Dolan Tonight, Friday, Saturday and Sunday from 9. Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Is shoplifting justified if you are desperate? This from Richard. Never an excuse under any circumstances. If we start going down this path, society will spiral and the lawless will control our society. Andrew, I've never heard such nonsense about shoplifting. Come to Blackpool and see what happens. It's people stealing for drugs. It's got nothing to do with being poor. Lisa says the same thing in Bristol. That woman knows nothing, your pundits. People do steal food to sell on, especially junkies, every day. On banks and Nigel Farage and other organisations being cancelled, Lisa says, hi Mark, do banks close the accounts of Stonewall, Mermaids or the Proud Trust? If not, then they're clearly biased and their practices need full scrutiny, as do those who have enabled this to happen. And last but not least, with the RAF convicted of essentially having found to have been prejudicial towards white candidates. This from Kevin. Hi, Mark. This is the tip of the iceberg in the UK. I've lived in South Africa for 25 years and have seen affirmative action and what it has done has destroyed the country. It makes no difference whatsoever. Thank you for that, Kevin. Keep those emails coming. Mark at gbnews.com. It's time for this. Yes, it's time for Mark Meets, and a man who came to international attention with the publication of his books, The Skeptical Environmentalist, Cool It, and False Alarm, How Climate Change Panic Costs Us Trillions, Hurts the Poor, and Fails to Fix the Planet, in which he acknowledges that climate change is real and man-made, but that efforts to mitigate it, including the race for net zero, are misguided and that the threat of rising temperatures has been overstated. Well, he is back. Best things first, the 12 most efficient solutions for the world's poorest and our global sustainable development goal promises. Bjorn Lomborg, welcome to Mark Dolan tonight. Let's have a little background from your previous books. You acknowledge that global warming exists, so is it good or bad?
Global warming is overall bad. There are pluses and minuses. There are more minuses than pluses. That's why it's a problem.
And what is your view of the race to net zero? What do you feel about the approach of governments like the UK of getting carbon neutral as quickly as possible?
Well, first of all, there's not much of a race. I mean, a lot of people are spending a lot of money. Globally, we are spending more than $1.1 trillion every year on trying to go net zero. But the actual outcome is that we still see emissions from fossil fuels going up, not down. And yes, we have more renewable energy, but not much more. We think we have a little more. We've probably gone from about 14% up to maybe 16.5% globally. So we're doing way too little. We're basically just starting, and we're already spending huge amounts of money.
So based upon your new book, what are some of the key ways to fix the world's problems? For example, climate change.
So what we did with this new book is basically say, look, you've got to ask where you can spend money and do the most good first. So it's not a question of saying we should solve everything. Of course, in a perfect world, we would do that. But we're not in that perfect world. We're actually delivering very little. And so if we're not doing any of the things that we promised, where could we do the most good first? So we identify 12 amazing things where we, for fairly little resources, could do incredible amounts of goods. So this would be something like doing something very simple about maternal and newborn deaths. So every year, I didn't know this before we started this project together with more than 100 of the world's top economists and several years of work. Every year, about 2.3 million kids die in their first 28 days on Earth, and about 300,000 moms die. We could do something about that very, very simply. It's about getting more mothers in to give birth, mostly in low-income countries, to give birth in institutions, and have the ready remedial opportunities there. So, for instance, about 700,000 kids don't breathe when they get born. If you have this little cheap plastic mask with a hand pump, it costs maybe $65. It can save 25 lives over the next 3 years. So have those kinds of things within each one of those birth institutions. Doing that would cost in the order of $5 billion. But, and here's the kicker, it would save 166,000 moms, and it would save 1.2 million kids' lives each and every year. So for every dollar spent or for every pound spent, you would end up doing $87 or pounds worth of good. That's a fantastic investment, and it's one that you can do right now. So again, the point is not that we shouldn't do everything. We should do some smart stuff on climate. One of the smartest things is to invest a lot more in research and development into green energy. But fundamentally, we need to also remember to do all these other smart things. So we look at education and land tenure security and lots of other things.
Well, that's right. We appreciate skepticism on the show. You're skeptical about the sort of so-called climate emergency. You're skeptical about measures to tackle our emissions. You are a minority voice on this issue. What would you say to those that argue that many mainstream scientists can't be wrong?
I don't disagree with the climate scientists. I've actually, like many, but certainly not most, read the whole UN climate panel report. I would agree to most of it. The vast majority of it.
But you don't agree with the measures, do you, Bjorn?
No, it's a question of saying global warming is a problem. If you read the UN climate panel report, and I don't recommend it, it's a very long and pretty boring report. It basically tells us this is a problem. The only climate economist to ever get the Nobel Prize in climate economics, William Nordhaus of Yale University, estimates, and many others do the same, that if we do nothing about climate, by the end of the century, it will have negative impacts that'll be equivalent to us losing about 4% of GDP. That's a problem. That's definitely a problem. It's not the end of the world. And that means we should think about this along with all the other problems. And there's something weird about the conversation that we have where everybody's saying, let's throw trillions of dollars into fixing climate.
Amen
but forgetting
to that.
the billions.
Bjorn, it's about proportionality. I've got to say, I read your last book, a cracking read. The next one is out. I'll be buying a copy. It is called Best Things First, the 12 most efficient solutions for the world's poorest. I'll be dealing with Gary Lineker next.
First and foremost, I'm a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the People's Channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my two comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute? Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christie's, at drive time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app, and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christie's, on GB News and GB News Radio.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
every Sunday from 11. Join Michael Portillo.
There'll be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Happy Friday, one and all. It's 10 o'clock on television, on radio and online in the United States and across the world. This is Mark Dolan Tonight. In My Take at 10, BBC star Gary Lineker has called for the bonkers idea of renationalising water. I'll be dealing with this millionaire socialist in no uncertain terms. Stick to flogging crisps, Gary. Following ITV News' report featuring a trans woman discussing the cost of living crisis, can a biological man ever be a mother? I'll be asking tonight's newsmaker, legendary actress and Allo Allo star Sue Hodge. And Mark Dolan Tonight is the home of the papers, with tomorrow's front pages from exactly 10:30 sharp. A very busy and lively hour to come. The weekend starts here on Mark Dolan Tonight. I'll be dealing with Gary Lineker in just a couple of minutes. He wants to renationalise water. Is he going to pay for it? First, the headlines with Aaron Armstrong.
Hello, good evening to you. I'm Aaron Armstrong in the GB newsroom. France's Interior Minister says the coming hours will be decisive as he has deployed 45,000 police in anticipation of a fourth night of civil unrest. Gérald Darmanin says 917 people were arrested on Thursday, with some as young as 13. Large events in France have been cancelled and buses and trams suspended nationwide. Widespread demonstrations, rioting and looting have flared since a 17-year-old boy of Algerian descent was shot dead by police in a suburb of Paris on Tuesday. British holidaymakers are being warned to check for curfews and travel restrictions. The government is aiming to employ 300,000 new staff in England as part of its NHS workforce plan. More doctors, nurses and other healthcare workers will be trained, in addition to creating more university places for medical and nursing students. There will also be a greater emphasis on apprenticeships. The 15-year plan aims to train more staff domestically to reduce reliance on international recruitment and agencies. The Prime Minister says it will focus on three key areas.
This is the NHS's own plan, and the government is proud to back it. Funding the expansion of education and training for the first 5 years in full, with over £2.4 billion of additional investment. You can trust this government with the NHS. The plan rests on three principles: train, retain and reform.
Lord Goldsmith says he's happy to apologise for sharing his views on the Commons' investigation into Boris Johnson's Partygate probe. The Tory peers hit back after Rishi Sunak said he'd refused to apologise, saying his comments about the Privileges Committee were incompatible with his position as a minister. Lord Goldsmith has now admitted he should not have expressed his views publicly. A court's been told the Oscar-winning actor Kevin Spacey is a sexual bully who exploited his illustriousness and influence to sexually assault other men. Prosecutors described Spacey as a man who delights in making others feel powerless and uncomfortable on day one of his trial at Southwark Crown Court. He's accused of attacking 4 men in their 20s and 30s during his 12 years in the UK. And Mr Spacey denies all allegations against him. Energy bills are likely to remain high for the immediate future, despite a saving of £406 a year from tomorrow. A new price cap comes into effect this weekend, but bills will still be almost double the amount they were before the energy crisis began 2 years ago. That's around £800 more. Ofgem says it has taken a range of steps to stabilise the market and to try to protect customers. And millions more British people will be given the opportunity to work down under as Australia is set to extend the age limit of its working holiday visa. The extension from 30 to 35 means 16 million adults will be now eligible from tomorrow. The visa duration will be extended from 2 to 3 years without the need for consecutive stays or farm work. And that is it for the moment. We'll be back with more in about an hour's time. Now it's back to Mark.
Thanks, Aaron. Aaron's back at 11 o'clock. Welcome to Mark Dolan Tonight. Following ITV News' report featuring a trans woman discussing the cost of living crisis, can a biological man ever be a mother? I'll be asking tonight's newsmaker, legendary actress and Allo Allo star Sue Hodge. Mark Dolan Tonight is the home of the papers with tomorrow's front pages at exactly 10:30 sharp. Some great headlines coming in as we speak. Plus, we'll have tonight's headline heroes and back page zeros, and my top pundits who haven't been told what to say and who don't follow the script. Speaking of which, here's my take at 10. Saint Gary Lineker is back. The millionaire socialist and Britain's first black footballer has been tackling the issue of Thames Water, who face bankruptcy. Gary has tweeted to his almost 9 million followers on Twitter, "Renationalise water, simple." Well, it's always simple when it's someone else's money, isn't it? Just like someone else will have to deal with the consequences of illegal immigration, to which Gary doesn't seem to object, as he luxuriates in his London mansion. Lineker has also tweeted criticism this week of the Rwanda policy, even though it is the express wish of a majority of the British people to stop the boats. But this is how it works with the media, corporate and political elite, of which Saint Gary Lineker is their darling. Lineker was a great footballer and is an excellent TV presenter, no problem. But it's so easy for wealthy virtue signallers to go on Twitter and make themselves look like lovely people by offering simple solutions which won't affect them to the complex problems of the world. His glib tweet about the water industry probably fired off as he waited for another Negroni at the Groucho Club or Soho House is typical of the kind of crowd-pleasing nonsense his ilk spew every day. The truth is the water industry needs to be looked at. But how is nationalisation the answer, given the fact that Britain itself is approaching bankruptcy? The cost of state ownership could be in excess of £20 billion to the taxpayer, plus endless liabilities going forward, money this country hasn't got. Is Saint Gary going to pay that bill, given he's so keen to put his name to this policy? I doubt it. Thanks to his own recent legal action against HMRC, which saw him reduce his tax bill by a cool £4.9 million, the Treasury now have even less money to play around with. This kind of activism from a man whose £1.6 million salary comes from a compulsory tax allows Lineker to boost his brand as an officially lovely person, whilst real Brits pay the price. In the case of water nationalisation, this would happen to the public via higher taxes and potentially even higher water bills. God knows it hasn't been perfect, but since privatisation in 1989, around £200 billion has been invested in the water industry in England. Leakage is down by a third since the mid-90s and is due to be cut by at least 16% by 2025 and by 50% by 2050. Water companies have spent around £25 billion on the environment since 1995, with 10,000 miles of rivers being protected and improved since then. Environmental work since privatisation has resulted in wildlife returning to rivers that had been biologically dead since the Industrial Revolution. There is no way the government could afford or will ever be able to afford that kind of investment. But why let a few facts get in the way of a rabble-rousing tweet? Lineker and his woke mates have been very clever by adopting a position which characterises them as the nice people. But there's nothing particularly nice about flogging junk food to kids, for which Saint Gary Lineker gets paid handsomely. And all this talk of nationalisation is deeply troubling. whether it's the push for a universal basic income, literally paying people to sit at home on their fat asses doing nothing, whether it's inflation-busting pay rises across the public sector, more borrowed billions for bloated public services, or the state buying up public utilities, when did socialism suddenly win the argument? Well, it hasn't won the argument, and it never will, because the government acting as entrepreneur has never worked, and the economic collectivism of which Lineker seems such a fan will finish off this country once and for all. Life has taught me one thing: whatever the problem, the state is not the answer. This nationalisation, this idea of buying up water, the whole idea is insane. I couldn't disagree with it more strongly. Waterload of nonsense from Lineker. The face of walkers has had his chips. What's your view, Mark at gbnews.com? Supporters of Gary Lineker would argue that our water industry is broken, it should come back into public hands, that it's a public good. That is what Gary would argue. And let's be honest, he's got 9 million followers. Plenty of people share what Gary has to say. But what do you think? Mark at gbnews.com. Reacting to my take at 10, journalist and agony aunt Hilary Freeman, historian and writer David Oldroyd-Bolt, and reporter and broadcaster Stephanie Tecci. Stephanie, waterload of rubbish from Gary Lineker.
I do like Gaz's tweets. I am a follower of him, Mark. But water is the source of life, and right now the water system in this country is broken. And while for a hot minute I was thinking, oh, Gary, I can see what you're talking about, I was thinking, actually, no, why should the government pick the £14 billion debts from companies such as Thames Valley? We've got so much to think about as a country right now that I think trying to nationalise water is not the way forward. I think that idea should have gone stale many years ago when Jeremy Corbyn tried to bring that as a part of his manifesto a few years ago. And I just think, let it remain in the hands of privatisation. But it is a worrying time, because if we leave it as it is, I don't see how it's going to get better in the hands of private companies.
My problem, Hilary Freeman, is wealthy celebrities sending tweets that make them look like really lovely people when the full implications of what they're suggesting will impact my viewers and listeners.
Well, you could say the same for people who have views that you share. I mean, just because someone's a celebrity doesn't mean they're not allowed to have an opinion. I happen to share his opinion. I don't think that the water industry should ever have been privatised in the first place. Something so fundamental to everybody's life shouldn't be the subject of foreign investment. It shouldn't be run for profit. And I think, you know, there was no debt when it was privatised. So how have they got into so much debt? It's not been run properly. But yeah, I don't think there's anything wrong with what he said, and he's allowed to have an opinion. And as you said, he's got 9 million followers, and some people share his view.
Oh, he's entitled to his opinions, and I love his opinions, because Hilary Freeman, they give me so much material. I think he's wrong about this.
And
David Oldroyd-Bolt, I don't know if I've sort of missed something here. When did socialism become the answer?
It hasn't become the answer. It's just that capitalists have forgotten how to make the arguments in a strong, effective and convincing way. Can we please remember, governments don't have any money. Anything they have, they take from you and from me in tax and then decide how to spend. And on Hillary's point that the water industry had no debt before it was privatised, that's because we just kept paying the debt off. £200 billion over 30 years is an investment that no government could possibly have made through taxation. It has improved our waterways, our beaches, our rivers. And now my great friend Fergal Sharkey is pursuing a wonderful campaign to make sure that the rivers, the chalk streams particularly, get even better. But none of this would have happened without the private capital coming in. And this is why you have a profit motive, because if you make money, if you sell a product well, you get more money and you can invest more of it. The reason that so much of the country has no industry left is because from 1945 until 1979, governments, both Tory and Labour, nationalised vast swathes of industry. They didn't invest because they couldn't invest, because the amount of money going into the tax system was lowered by socialism, and consequently the Midlands and the North suffered deeply, and the South West. Everybody forgets the South West suffered deeply as well. So I should like to ask Mr Lineker, is he proposing, what, a levy to fund this? Is he proposing that we defund schools and defund the NHS and defund the armed forces to pay for this? And why should the taxpayer take on the burden of the £14 billion debt? That should be a burden that is assumed by some group consortium of private equity coming in, taking over the company and running it better. And if there's a failure of regulation that means that the debt burden has grown too great for the assets of the company, that can be reassessed through parliamentary scrutiny and legislation. But the answer to failing private companies is never to put that failure on the taxpayer. It is always to get someone to come in and do it better.
Well, indeed. Now, this story was not picked up in the media this week. Mark Dolan Tonight is a show that doesn't just break the news, it makes it as well. So your reaction to Gary Lineker's call for the nationalisation of water. When did socialism become the answer? When did socialism win the argument? We've got the papers at 10:30 sharp with full pundit reaction, but next, looking forward to this. Following ITV News' report featuring a trans woman discussing the cost of living crisis, can a biological man ever be called a mother? I'll be asking tonight's newsmaker, legendary actress and Allo Allo star Sue Hodge, and she's not pulling her punches.
Like all families, we have arguments every now and then, but actually we agree on what the mission of GB News is, and that's the most fundamentally important thing.
GB News provides the kind of platform that lets all voices be heard.
We don't hold back. We're free to say what we really think. Just because some people who live in a tiny little Westminster bubble think that their particular story is important, that's not the most important story for me.
And often they will be difficult stories that you won't find on the establishment media.
Because what people think in the north of England may be very different to what they're thinking in the home counties.
We're going to carry on telling the world what life is really like for households up and down the UK.
We love to be in your car, in your kitchen as you're having your breakfast. Whatever you're doing, you are part of the show. If it matters to you, it matters to us.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it. So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi, I'm Dan Wootton. You can watch me live on GB News Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. And did you know that you can also watch and listen live on our website, gbnews.com. You'll always be up to date on the latest breaking news, as well as enjoying the best stories, opinions and shows. You can even join the debate under our live player as you're watching. So head straight to gbnews.com on TV, radio and online. GB News, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes and Kerr, we tackle the issues of the day with real robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
I do love this email from Peter. Gary Lineker has 9 million followers on Twitter. Extremely worrying that so many people lead such bleak lives. Steve says, hi Mark, I agree with your slant on Lineker. Just to bring you up to date in case you're joining us, Gary Lineker has said on Twitter this week he wants to nationalise the water industry. It'll cost at least £20 billion. Is he going to pay for it? Steve says, I agree with you. He's another rich boy who cares nothing for the working classes, but gets their adoration by masquerading as a lefty woke. The woke bit I can understand, but how can he be a socialist when he takes such a massive public wage for doing nothing whilst other public service employees have difficulty putting food on the table? He's a miserable hypocrite, and heaven knows who these 9 million followers could be on Twitter. Imaginary in the main, I would say. However, Robert has said, Mark, I completely disagree with you about Gary Lineker. The water industry is a complete mess, and this guy is standing up for what is right across a whole range of issues. Well, thank you for that. It's all about opinions, isn't it? Keep them coming. Mark at gbnews.com. Now, ITV News, our bitter rivals, have raised eyebrows for using a Labour-supporting transgender climate change activist during its coverage of the Thames water crisis. On Wednesday's News at 10, Mika Minio Pauello was seen washing up and doing some laundry whilst she spoke of how the soaring water costs will be footed by bill payers and taxpayers. During the clip, she described the rising water bills as being tough if you're a mum. Take a listen.
This customer fears that either bill payers or taxpayers will end up picking up the tab.
The idea that we're going to have even greater water bills, soaring bills, at a time of prices already being hiked, we have to pay a lot for food. That's tough if you're a mum like me, already struggling to get the things that my kid needs.
Customers rightly want the lowest possible pollution, but also the lowest bills. For Thames Water and the entire sector, that's creating a financial fault line.
Blimey, I like a MILF as much as anyone, but that one's a challenge. This raises the question of whether a political activist should have been used in an item designed to feature a member of the public, but it also begs the question, can a biological male who identifies as female ever be a mother? Let's get the views now of tonight's newsmaker, legendary actress and star of Allo Allo, Sue Hodge. What do you think about this, Sue? I've been asking my viewers and listeners in an exclusive Mark Dolan Tonight poll, the results of which are coming. But can a biological man ever be a mother?
The first thing I want to know, hello, you naughty boy, have you missed me?
Miss you hugely. Listen, I've been counting the days since your second appearance. Do you realise you broke the internet last time you were on? Our ratings were through the roof because you talk sense.
Oh, I say. I'll tell you what, fancy asking me this question. Look, I've been involved in pantomime for 50 years. I have had mothers who are men dressed in frocks. I have had brothers who are in tunics with fishnets. They are actually female. So it seems to me that actually you can be anything you really want to be today.
Indeed. Are you surprised by the reaction to this story? Some of my viewers, especially female viewers, think it's an insult that somebody who's a biological male should use the word mother, that the word mother is sacred in some way.
Look, at the end of the day, this child who they've brought into the world, however they've done it, or whichever way they've done it, didn't ask to be brought into the world. So the bottom line for me is, you decided this, you made this decision, so whomever or whatever, you're called mother, you're called this, you're called whatever, the bottom line is this child that you have actually brought into the world should be loved and cared for no matter what. The bottom line on this is love this child no matter what, because you made a decision to bring it into the world in the first place.
Well, indeed so. But, if you look at, for example, the response of the Labour MP Rosie Duffield, she tweeted ITV News the following. She said, "Dear ITV News, I'm sure this is a lovely, intelligent and decent human being. This was an important piece. This is not, however, a struggling mother." And she puts the word mother in inverted commas.
Well, excuse me, I think today everybody is struggling in some shape or form anyway. This is a difficult difficult world that we're living in. So no matter what, I mean, I'm sorry, I'll still say the bottom line is you make that decision. Look, I knew that I was going to be a working actress and that I wasn't going to hire nannies and do all this and that, because I thought, no, that's not right, that's not fair. And I am selfish in the fact that I wanted my career, etc., etc. So I gave up that choice of bringing a child into the world because I thought my duty, no matter what or what I am, is to that child, to love that child and give it everything that I could possibly give it. So I'm sorry, I mean,
I'm sorry to interrupt you.
To me.
But Sue, I think the issue that lots of my viewers and listeners have got is using the word mother for a biological male.
Well, I'm sorry, as I say, I've had for 50 years dames that I've called mother, and they are men and they're wearing frocks. So,
but they're playing characters, Sue.
To ask about this.
But Sue, they're playing characters, aren't they? That's theatre. We're talking about the real world here.
I know it's theatre, etc. But, I mean, the whole world to me has gone bonkers about this. I mean, I'm struggling now. I run a summer school, right? And I'm struggling what to call these children sometimes.
Yeah.
He, it, them, shit. I don't know. I'm confused. I mean, if someone can help me out on this. I mean, I still say, do you know what? I don't use the word mother anyway. I'll say mummy.
Absolutely right. Look, let's be clear that this individual is a mother. Well, at least they are the parent of a child that identifies as a mother. And you've got to say it's a free world. Good luck to her. The question is the wisdom of ITV for running that particular item. But that debate will continue. Meanwhile, Sue, the boss of WH Smith has said the retailer won't be opening any more UK high street stores. Instead, it will be focusing on airports and train stations. We've also got news that Boots, the amazing, iconic chemist, is going to close 300 branches. Is it game over for the great British high street, Sue?
Well, it has been for a while, and I mean, all I can say is it's not done my book any harm, although Mimi's memoirs, because I'm in WH Smith everywhere, so this is great for me.
I'm glad to hear it. Sue, what do you think of Boots? Because I struggle in Boots these days. There isn't anyone at the cash desk. It's very hard to pay.
Well, darling, if you're going to go into a shop with your boots on, if your boots are letting in water, change your boots.
Very wise advice, let me tell you. Fabulous stuff. Listen, Sue, we'll catch up very soon. The brilliant Sue Hodge, star of Hello, Hello and Stage and Screen, always the voice of common sense. We'll catch up soon and get some more of your emails shortly, plus tomorrow's papers as well with full pundit reaction. Don't go anywhere.
I joined GB News because I was sick and tired of not hearing my views being represented, not just mine, but so many people that I knew and spoke to.
I just couldn't get my voice out there. I couldn't say anything. I couldn't do anything. Whatever the narrative was, I kind of had to follow it.
GB News is there to provide a voice for those who have been ignored by the establishment media. We think different things, we've got a different style.
GB News is here to be optimistic and positive about the future.
It's real kind of dynamic and flowing, with the audience very much at the heart of it, like a big family.
Here at GB News, we talk about the things that matter to you.
Hearing the voices from right across our towns and cities, especially our towns.
All sides of the argument represented with a heavy dose of opinion.
We're on a mission here to make a difference.
And the GB News family really is here for you, and whatever time of day you can watch or listen.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not believe in prisons? I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
You've probably seen politicians interviewed 1,000 times, but we do it differently. We find out who they really are, we don't shout, we chat, and hopefully we bring a bit of light, not just heat.
Did you know,
All
Kate
sorts
Moss?
of Apparently.
Do you have a pair of jeans or a pair of jeans?
No, of course I don't. What would I do with them?
My friends are like, oh my God, what's she doing now?
Join me every Sunday at 6 for Gloria Meets, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Weeknights on GB News from 6 p.m. You'll always get drama.
Please stop, Michelle.
I know, yeah.
Please stop.
Should I just shut up?
Romance.
You like me, I like you. There you go.
There you are. Well, don't tell anybody.
Adventure.
Etc.
That's the whole point. But
And action.
Sergeant, the big green, my superstar panel, they're already at it. They're fighting. It's going to be quite a show.
Only on GB News. Britain's watching.
In a world of dull and predictable radio and TV shows.
Oh, hi. On Mark Dolan tonight, we've got big guests. We drill into the big stories of the day. The show adds up to a brilliant listening and viewing experience. Mark Dolan Tonight is the most entertaining current affairs show ever, and that's a fact. That's Mark Dolan Tonight, Friday, Saturday and Sunday from 9. Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Very busy show. Great to have your company as always. Let's catch up on the emails, mark@gbnews.com. Let's have a look at our issue here that we're debating. And I've been asking you in an exclusive Mark Dolan Tonight People's Poll, can a biological man ever be a mother? I shall be revealing the results of that in just a few minutes. Peter says, if a biological man can be a mother, as an engineer, I'd love to see the tools they use in the maternity suite. Let's face it, it's a pair of forceps and they're not going to work. Peter, thank you for that. Keep those emails coming. Maybe I'll just get, I should hear, shouldn't I, from a lady. So this is from Lisa. Mark, some men in same-sex relationships can, of course, take the mother role. But by using a trans man to talk about Thames water and the cost of living, it's at first glance farcical. But in fact, it's deeply troubling that ITV uses a trans person to talk about it, and clearly a gaslighting effort. Why did they introduce an entirely different and highly controversial issue embedded in an everyday problem for the vast majority? Lisa, thank you for that. Keep those emails coming. mark@gbnews.com. Just gone 10:30, as always, every Friday, Saturday and Sunday. Tomorrow's papers. Let's start with the Telegraph, and they lead with... OK, a very important set of stories. French police at war with vermin is the quote, as rioting spreads across the nation. French police said tonight they were at war with savage hordes of vermin as France was rocked by waves of riots and looting. As intemperate language, I think we can all agree. British travellers were warned about the risk of possible curfews and travel restrictions owing to the growing upheaval and vandalism around France. Two of the country's top police unions threatened a revolt unless Emmanuel Macron's government restored order after protests broke out over the police shooting of a teenager in a Paris suburb. Sunak in deal with Italy to stem migrant flow in Mediterranean. Rishi Sunak is drawing up a plan with the Italians to stem the flow of migrants across the Mediterranean and return them to North Africa. The PM dispatched Simon Case, the UK's most senior civil servant, to Italy last month for 2 days of meetings with the country's government officials to hammer out the deal. The new strategic migration partnership between the UK and Italy will mirror aspects of the agreement with France by boosting intelligence sharing on people smugglers, joint operations, and they will work together with their border forces and national crime agencies. Also, struggling parish churches to be rented out instead of sold. The Times now. UK tourists are warned over travel to France. The Daily Mail. Dentists will have to work for the NHS. New dentists will be forced to devote years to the NHS to help tackle staff shortages under plans unveiled by Rishi Sunak today. They'll be tied into the NHS rather than lost to private practice. The PM said it was unacceptable that 2 in 3 left the health service straight after qualifying. He said it was reasonable to require them to spend some time in the health service. The Daily Express. Honour Diana's memory, bury the hatchet. Princess Diana's sons were today urged to end their feud after failing to acknowledge each other at a ceremony for the only charity set up in her name. Today would have been Diana's, of course they're referring to tomorrow. Tomorrow would have been Diana's 62nd birthday, but at the event today to celebrate her legacy, Harry and William made no reference to one another in separate video messages recorded more than 5,000 miles apart. Oscar winner on trial, Kevin Spacey, a sexual bully. The Guardian, Goldsmith quits over Sunak's climate apathy. Rishi Sunak was embroiled in an extraordinary standoff with Zach Goldsmith yesterday after the Tory peer quit the government, accusing the Prime Minister of being simply uninterested in the environment and the climate emergency. Also, NHS reform, concern over plans to boost the workforce. Last but not least, Daily Star. Not content with being better at cricket, now Aussie Drongos attempting 16 million of our Bruces and Sheilas down under. Rack off, you gate galahs. Hope I said that right. Crikey. Aussie larrikins have changed their immigration rules so millions more Brits can enjoy the good life down under. It all sounds bonza until you nippers become shark biscuits. And those are your front pages. Reacting to the big stories of the day. Journalist in agony aunt Hilary Freeman, historian and writer David Oldroyd-Bolt, and reporter and broadcaster Stephanie Tecci. Lots of stories to get through. Things going very badly wrong in France, David Oldroyd-Bolt. Is there a lesson here for the UK? Can we learn from this?
Well, the first lesson is don't be Emmanuel Macron and don't think that you are the reincarnation of Louis XIV or Napoleon. I thought it was extraordinarily historically dumb of him to say, as he did recently, that he was going to have his new 100 days, because anybody who remembers Napoleon's 100 days will remember it's when he went from Elba, out of exile, picked up a load of soldiers and went to Waterloo, where I think he lost. So maybe not the best historical comparison. On a very serious point, Macron has really struggled over the course of his presidency to embody the nation and to come across as a father figure of a president. He comes across as exceptionally arrogant, exceptionally Parisian and metropolitan, and I think he's heading for an extraordinarily large defeat, unfortunately, to Marine Le Pen. And the big problem that they're having here is that the riots have gone, as it were, viral. It started exceptionally quickly. On Saturday, when the riots were beginning, Macron chose to go listen to Elton John rather than dealing with the national crisis. His comments have been utterly intemperate.
I guess that's why they call it Les Bleus.
Well done.
We're working on that all day.
I mean, he's got no ability.
I'm still standing for office. Oh, all right.
I guess that's your song.
Thank you. Oh, nicely done. Bravo. I mean, does it raise the question, has France's multicultural experiment failed?
I think all of Europe's multicultural experiment has failed and is continuing to fail. You see this in Germany, where Frau Merkel allowed 1 million migrants into Germany, and it has caused division, it's caused breakdown in civil society, it's caused a great strain on public services. You see this in Italy with the migrant crisis. France has had this problem ever since the 1960s, particularly with migrants from its own former colonies. Yeah, and this is a long-standing problem.
But I'm sorry, this case here is not about multiculturalism. It's about a 17-year-old teenager who's been shot by French police. Yeah. That's nothing to do with multiculturalism. That's to do with the French police not even abiding to their own laws and killing a young man. This is why the French are rioting right now.
Is it their George Floyd moment?
It is their George Floyd moment, and we're going to keep on having these moments if police think it's OK to shoot young men. There's a way. The reason why you are in the law is that you're supposed to be protecting your community and not shooting young men.
Yes, but this comes off the back of many, many years where French police, who are distinct from the gendarmerie, the police are not armed, have had to deal with rising waves of crime, particularly drug-related crime, in the suburbs of Parisian cities, of French cities, the banlieue as they're known, where they've essentially become no-go areas, and policemen have been very badly injured, and in some cases killed. So, yes, this is an appalling murder, and this is the ultimate spark point, but it comes after many, many years when the police have felt themselves to be underprotected by the state and the citizens whom they exist to protect. And so you've got both sides of the argument, as it were, ready for a great clash.
I think the problem is it's the opposite of multiculturalism, is because people have been segregated and put into these really poor kind of ghettos. And actually, that is why these problems have grown up. So unlike in this country where people are much more mixed, you know, you don't have an area here where where only black people live. But in Paris, for example, there are these areas where it's just full of Algerians and nobody else, and no one else will go there. So that's what's created this problem. But also, why has a traffic policeman got a gun?
Yeah.
What purpose has that got?
Indeed. So let's move on now to this story, another story in the Telegraph. Sunak in deal with Italy to stem migrant flow in Mediterranean. The bottom line, Stephanie, is he's got his list of 5 promises that he's got to deliver, his five pledges. Halve inflation, well, that's not going brilliantly, is it? Fix the NHS, good luck with that, and stop the boats. But he's not going to give up because his fate at the next election depends on it.
It does, but I feel like Sunak's it's a losing battle for him. I think when it comes to immigration and dealing with the migrants, it's almost like a bigger problem than any Prime Minister can handle. And I don't think you can just tackle it for Sunak in the next year or so. There's so many... I feel like he's just trying to shift the problems onto different countries.
Is there any political capital, though, in him being seen to do something about it? That he can go to the public in a year's time and say, look, I'm absolutely overwhelmed by this challenge. It's very, very difficult, but I'm going to beaver away. I'm going to try. I'll do more than Labour. One thing I do like about Rishi is he is a doer, and when he does say he's going to do something, it's quite admirable that he actually puts he puts honour to his words. But I think as well, it's not him being realistic about this situation, and I just think, poor Rishi, he's kind of... if he tries to do things, he's going to get criticised, and if he doesn't do it, he's going to get criticised either way. Speaking of Rishi Sunak, he's come out with a big announcement today, Hilary, about the NHS and a blitzkrieg of training and new nurses, new doctors, a massive, massive recruitment drive. And the Daily Mail lead with dentists will have to work for the NHS. The Prime Minister has said it was reasonable to require dentists to spend some time in the NHS after benefiting from training that amounted to a very significant subsidy from the taxpayer worth hundreds of thousands of pounds. Do you agree?
Yeah, I do agree. I think we've talked about this before. I remember that people cannot get a dentist. They're taking their own teeth out in this country because you cannot get an NHS dentist. So I think it's essential that there are more NHS dentists. And if this is the only way that it can be done, this is the only way it can be achieved, then yes, I think that is important. But the problem is, how are they going to fund it?
You have to know, are you impressed by a story that Sunak would like us to be talking about today? It's been pushed to the side by other news. But what do you think about this new line from Sunak that dentists are going to have to work for the NHS and that he's going to recruit?
Well, I just asked a simple question that we ask whenever we discuss the NHS. How is it going to be paid for? Are we going to be taxed ever more? Are we going to defund other aspects of the public services? Or are we at some point going to have a really quite serious conversation and realise that this model does not work for modern Britain? There are too many people, the population is growing too quickly, largely through immigration. Public services are under massive strain already. The tax base is not growing because the country's economy is not growing. So where is this extra money going to come from? I would love it if the NHS were well-funded and functioning, and if it didn't have some of the worst health outcomes in Europe. It isn't the case. It's not going to change unless we suddenly go through an extraordinary spurt of economic growth and there is more tax money available. And so, as laudable as the idea is, I think, like all of Mr Sunak's pledges on the NHS, it's utterly unworkable and is just election rhetoric, really. It has no chance of success.
In the Daily Express, Stephanie Tecci, honour Diana's memory, bury the hatchet, a message to William and Harry, who have spoken on the eve, this was today, the eve of her, what would have been 62nd birthday tomorrow. And of course, she would be so devastated to know that they were at war in this way. Bury the hatchet, will they ever? Will that happen?
I don't think. I think too much damage has been done, primarily from Harry towards William. He's exposed their relationship for the whole public to know that actually, no, these brothers are, not been as close as we thought they were. And I think, why should they have to bury the hatchet? Also, William has disrespected Harry's wife in certain circumstances as well. So I don't think there's no point of them putting this image...
You mean the other way around? Do you mean Harry has disrespected William's wife?
They've both disrespected each other's wives. They both have. Yeah. And I just don't think there's no need for this facade anymore, that they're type brothers anymore. Poor Diana, I can imagine her heart must be broken, but King Charles hasn't done anything to bring these two brothers together.
Well, Hilary, you're a relationship expert. This is, do we call it fratricide? This is the brother on brother.
It's like Cain and Abel,
Cain
isn't
and Abel,
it?
yeah. Will this relationship ever be repaired?
I'm not sure that it will. Certainly not while Meghan's around. I think perhaps if Harry and Meghan split up, about which there have been quite a lot of rumours lately, haven't there? Then perhaps if he comes back here, then I think William will perhaps forgive his brother. But at the moment, I can't see that happening.
No, because if they were to split Harry and Meghan, then she becomes the fall guy. She's the collateral damage. You go, look, it wasn't. Listen, bro, it wasn't me. It was the missus.
Exactly. I was under her influence.
She carries the can. You are a top expert on human relationships, agony art. How long do you give that marriage, Harry and Meghan?
Couple more years, maybe. I can't.
Why do you say that?
Yeah.
Why not forever?
I don't see that they have that much in common to really last the distance. I think Harry's living in another country, which is very difficult. As somebody in a relationship with someone from another country, I know that comes with its trials and tribulations. He's not at home. He's not got anyone around him, and they're not doing well as a couple. They've been distancing themselves from each other lately, career-wise. They've been doing a lot on their own, and there's definitely, I think they're growing apart.
OK, briefly, I've got to get to the break. How long do you give that marriage, Harry and Meghan?
Until she decides to run for US president after the next election. And then she finds it inconvenient to be a duchess.
Do you know what? Bring back Biden, all is forgiven. How about you? How long do you give it?
I actually think Meghan's in it for the long run. I think they're actually going to make it.
Harry.
I think
I'm
they're
not sure if
go
that's
the
even
distance.
worse news, to be honest. It's a death sentence, a life sentence. Coming up, more from the papers, including The Independent. Let me also tell you that we've been running an exclusive Mark Dolan Tonight People's Poll. We've been asking, can a biological male ever be a mother? We'll bring you the results of that next.
First and foremost, I am a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the people's channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The people's channel.
Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my two comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute? Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christie's, at Drive Time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app, and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christie's, on GB News and GB News Radio.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News.
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Will William and Harry ever bury the hatchet? Yes, they will bury the hatchet, says Carol. The media are the issue. Harry was the spare and was never given assistance mentally. He had to walk behind a coffin at the age of 11 in front of millions. They owe him big time. Have we forgotten how Princess Margaret behaved? And Andrew worse than that. Thank you very much, Carol. And she also refers to the clown Fergie as well. Thanks for your emails tonight. It's always the best bit of the show when you get in touch. mark@gbnews.com. I've got to say, I got a furious email from somebody earlier, and it was regards... Oh, yes, let me just quickly read this out. And it's from Alex, who says, Mark, just stop fibbing. Only a few of the thousands of emails sent to you will ever cross your lips. So please don't claim that if people send an email, it will be read out. Despite your claim that viewers' emails are the highlight of your show, you spare a tiny amount of time for them. I like much of your show, but not your lies and your pretense. Alex, you've given me a proper handbagging there, and you're entitled to do so. Alex, if I could, the whole show, the whole 2 hours would be your emails. Thank you for sending yours in and keep them coming. I especially like it when we don't agree, but I like all of them. And look, Alex, I will try where possible to make as much time as I can for your feedback. I think as GB News shows go, this probably has the most feedback of all, but I'll keep on trying. Now, let's talk about this massive story. Oh, first of all, The Independent. Front page of The Independent, please. Thank you, folks. The Indie, no-go warning to Britons as riots rage in France. Holidaymakers urged to avoid areas of Paris where shops are looted and cars burned as 40,000 police are deployed across the country to quell violent protests against a fatal shooting of a teenager. Now, this has been a topic that broke the internet over the last 24 hours. ITV News ran a report about the cost of living crisis, and they featured a biological male who identifies as female, who called herself a mother. She said, I'm a mother struggling with the bills. So on Twitter, we've been asking, can a biological man ever be a mother? The results are in. 94% of you said no, 5% said yes. So a landslide there from our viewers and listeners that a biological man cannot be a mother. Stephanie?
What did the 1% say?
Well, that's a good question. Don't know. I think they're gender neutral.
It's such a hard question, but I have to say that a biological man cannot be a mother. I think that's a disrespect to mothers all over the world, and the experiences that mothers go through in raising their children is not something that can be bought, it's not something that can be earned, it's something they go from raising up their children. You know, the reason why I find this a very hard topic, because then there's also women out there who can't have children, who then become mothers, and I wouldn't tell them they're not mothers. But when it comes to a biological man trying to parade that they're part of this womanhood of motherhood, I can't be down with that, I'm afraid.
Really? What about you, Hilary?
Well, from a very personal point of view, I had a stillbirth, my first child. I went through pregnancy, I gave birth to her, I held her in my arms, she wasn't alive. And the one thing that comforted me was when people said to me, you're still a mother, you have given birth to this child. And that actually is a dictionary definition of being a mother as well, is giving birth to a child. And so for me, seeing you know, men being called, or transgender women being called mothers that haven't been through the experience of pregnancy and giving birth, for me, it's insulting to my experience. It takes something away from my experience and the experience of other women who've gone through something like that. Being a mother is to do with being female. It's about the placenta. It's about the milk. It's about giving birth. It's about carrying a baby in your womb. It's not about just mothering. That's a different. That's a verb. That's not a noun. And I think yes, you can mother, but that doesn't make you a mother. And yes, you can parent. You can be a parent, but that's still not the same as being a mother. So yeah, I don't approve of this.
But of course, most people, David, if a male identified as female, most people would respect the pronouns. You used to be called Bob, and now you're called Margaret. Good luck to you. What's the difference if you're a mother or a father?
I think the difference is, for all the reasons that Hilary and Stephanie both outline, that it is a gross mockery of motherhood, of all that it entails biologically, hormonally, chemically and physically, to say that someone dressing up as a woman can be a mother. It's simply not the case. It's just ridiculous. And I understand the compassion argument, I really do, but it is an excess of compassion that has led us to this situation. It is an excess of courtesy which has meant that we've begun to deny as a society biological truth. There are men and there are women. Fathers fulfil a distinct role. And again, it has a lot to do with biology. It's a lot to do with the hormonal connection with the child. Women, as mothers, fulfil a distinct role. Those two cannot be interchanged, and those cannot be cosplayed, as it were, by people who think that they are, or have decided that they are of a different sex. They're not, they can't be, and I think if I were a woman, because this is a particularly emotive issue, I should be exceptionally displeased with Tesco and withdraw my custom as a consequence.
Let's now get to your headline heroes and back page zeros. Let's power through these heroes. Hilary, who's smiling on you today?
Well, the person that I want to have as my hero is a man called Nick Hungerford, who unfortunately is dying of bone cancer. He's an entrepreneur and he's only got 2 months left to live. He's got a little girl who's just 2 years old. And rather than just spending his last couple of months with his family, he's actually set up a charity to help other bereaved children who are going to face what his daughter's going through. And I think he's a real hero.
I don't think that can be beaten. What a fabulous nomination. Briefly, if you can, David, your headline hero?
Well, mine is Nigel Farage for standing up against the power of woke corporatism and, I hope, starting a debate about what we consider to be necessary banking services in the 21st century. So well done, Nigel.
And Stephanie, your headline hero?
Naomi Campbell, who at the age of 53 has welcomed her second child, and she says it's never too late for motherhood.
Too right. Listen, I loved my pundits tonight. Let me tell you that their back page zeros were unanimous, the French police, who are doing such a bad job over there in Paris. Thank you to my fantastic pundits. Really enjoyed your company tonight. Fabulous. Looked gorgeous, made so many good points and carried the show. Speaking of which, thank you for your company, listening on the radio, watching on telly. I'm back tomorrow at 9. We've got a really busy show. But next up, it is Headliners. If you're enjoying Mark Dolan tonight, tell your friends, tell your family. Let's change the world together.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, from 9:30 on Sunday morning when I'll be quizzing Health Secretary Steve Barclay on the government's new plans for reforming the NHS. And in a week that's seen Rishi Sunak's plan to stop the boats hit a setback in the courts, I'll speak to a key supporter of the Rwanda scheme, Tory MP Daniel Kawczynski, and crossbench peer Alex Carlisle, a critic who's trying to slow down the bill in the House of Lords. All that and more with me, Camilla Tominey, from 9:30 on Sunday morning.
Like all families, we have arguments every now and then, but actually we agree on what the mission of GB News is, and that's the most fundamentally important thing.
GB News provides the kind of platform that lets all voices be heard.
We don't hold back. We're free to say what we really think.
Just because some people who live in a tiny little Westminster bubble think that their particular story is important, that's not the most important story for me.
And often they will be difficult stories, stories that you won't find on the establishment media.
Because what people think in the north of England may be very different to what they're thinking in the home counties.
We're going to carry on telling the world what life is really like for households up and down the UK.
We love to be in your car, in your kitchen as you're having your breakfast. Whatever you're doing, you are part of the show. If it matters to you, it matters to us.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes